Welcome to the Pharma and Biotech Thought Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Shanna Landalt. Today I have a really exciting interview for you. I'll be interviewing Paul Petrelli, who spent the last 11 years with Biogen, where he was their general manager in Canada and also worked in the US on their rare disease business. Paul is going to be speaking with me today about 4 factors that are really influencing the go-to-market strategy for pharma and biotech companies. So without further ado, let's go to our interview with Paul Petrelli. Paul, it's great to have you here today on the Pharma and Biotech Thought Leadership Podcast. Change is something that is inevitable, and it's fair to say that the model for going to market and launching or promoting a pharma or biotech product, it's changing. I'm curious, what are some of the factors and influencers that will change the go-to-market model in the coming years?
So, Shanna, thank you very much for inviting me to the podcast as well. It's a great opportunity to be able to digest and look forward at what the market's going to be. I think somebody being in the industry for 20 years like myself and an advocate for the Canadian healthcare system, as well as a leader in biotech and pharma, I think it's incumbent on folks like myself to be able to, I think, be the barometer for what are things to come and try and shape what change will be. When I look at the industry over the last 20 years, I think there have been a few significant changes. And what I deem as the 4 influencers of the go-to-market model would include digital media. As we all know, it's here. Social media and components of being able to get information real time is having a significant impact.
It's interesting, Paul, because when you look at digital media, at first the pharma and biotech industry resisted it, thinking, oh my goodness, this is not something that we can control. What if people say something? But digital media is here to stay. So how is that going to actually impact our go-to-market model?
Well, it's interesting how you say we've resisted it. I still think we're behind in terms of where we need to be. In a presentation I did a little while back, I actually said, us using IVRs and teledetailing is not us getting into the social age. I think there's still a lot of work for us to do, but there has been an impact and we're being forced to move in that direction. When you look at where physicians are getting their information today, and a study that was done back in 2009, which I find quite interesting, is that almost 90% of physicians then relied on the web to be able to get their information. And that was in 2009. When you look a little bit further into that, almost 60% of physicians are doing it while they're in their office. And when they're looking at it for 3 minutes or less. So they're getting real-time information when they want it, where they want it. And the challenge that it's facing is it's now starting to become a new competitor for us when we put our field people out there, be it sales or medical, because now physicians can get the information when they want in their busy schedules and not have to rely on your friendly sales rep or MSL coming in with Tim Hortons Timbit and coffee.
Right. Now, I'm curious, one of the things about social media is as a company or an organization, when you create your marketing pieces, you have a lot of control over what's actually out there on the web by virtue of the marketing and pieces that you publish. So is it that you're in competition with the web, or can you really use that information to your advantage from a go-to-market perspective?
So I don't think the web is a competition. I think what it is doing is it's competing for physicians' time.
Yes.
Before, we would be measuring the success of our people based on reach and frequencies, how many times they can see a doctor, let's say. Today, doctors, again, aren't relying on the reps to be able to get information. So the competition is more where the information is coming from. When you look at some of the statistics, greater than 50% of the information physicians are getting from the web basically are exactly what our sales reps and medical science liaisons are doing as well. So it's more of an embracement than it is a competition. And I think we have to look at a partnership between the two. This isn't a if and or situation. It's a combination of both having the human contact and touch, as well as being able to supplement and integrate it with the digital age.
Great. It's interesting. I note that every single time I've gone to the doctor, either myself or with my children in the last year, my doctor has gone onto the web specifically to look up which dosage, which side effects, which medication, everything he's doing completely on the web.
And it's making it all real time, which I think is fantastic because it's providing updated information that's going to help make the right choices for physicians and patients as they treat their therapies.
Digital media definitely is an influencer. What are some of the other things that you see influencing the go-to-market model?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, Shanna, there was the four, and digital's definitely front and center, especially from the commercial side. Reimbursement and the reimbursement model is becoming more and more complex. As we all know, in Canada, the complexity is not only the fact that you can consider Canada being 13 territories and provinces in one country, and you have to manage each one of the provincial constituents, but there's also the complexity of looking at now PMPRB, the Pan-Canadian Pricing Alliance, CADIF, P-Coder. You've also got now the private payers, where historically they've been somewhat of an easier way to get for patients to get access. Now they're starting to get involved in more PLAs and listing agreements as well. So that complexity is adding a wrinkle in terms of how we partner with them to be able to ensure that patients get the right access for therapies.
So what are some of your recommendations or suggestions for navigating that complexity?
Yeah, it's a challenging one because I think there's multiple conflicting strategies at play. Obviously, there's a pricing pressure that's going on, and there's only so much money available in the pot, let's say. Yet the other challenge is that you've got new therapies coming to market. In the rare disease space, for example, I remember reading an article recently that said there's over 500 rare disease therapies that are in some level of research right now. And a lot of these therapies are basically unfunded. They're not Me Too's, or they're not coming in as a replacing another therapy. These are brand new. So right. I think the sooner we can get in front of the payers, start partnering with them to start helping them understand what the opportunity is, building a clinical trial so that there is an opportunity to see the value for money, and helping them secure funds and making funds available will make access sooner and quicker in Canada.
How do you see personalized medicine impacting that reimbursement model? Because this isn't just, here's one drug and perhaps it can work for you, but it really is, in the future, I imagine that not only could very niche or rare diseases have personalized medical approaches, but there could be all sorts of diseases or illnesses where it could be tailored to my DNA.
Yeah, that's interesting. Personalized medicine seems to be one of the hot topics today, and I think rightly so. I think it touches on a few opportunities. One, as we talked about on the reimbursement model, the better we can get at putting the right therapy in the right patient in the right time will obviously have cost consequences and hopefully decrease costs associated with the overall funding. But personalized medicine also has an impact on what I think is one of the third influencers, and that's the expanded focus on local outcomes and post-marketing analysis. There's more and more requests for really understanding what therapies are doing out in the real world. They're also trying to understand if there is value for money, and obviously looking at the safety and efficacy of the therapies out there. So we can better refine and understand what are some of the biomarkers for us to be able to ensure that the right patient is taking the right therapy at the right time.
When you're talking about local outcomes, what exactly does that mean? When you're looking at an expanded focus on local outcomes, what exactly is a local outcome?
So an expanded focus on local outcomes is looking at investing in doing more trials in the Canadian market, in the therapeutic area, obviously. So it can range from everywhere from working with academia and patient advocacy groups to be able to understand what are some of still the underlying unmet questions that need to be answered. But I think there needs to be a shift as well in the industry, moving away from the typical phase 4, hey, let's just prove that the drug works, to now investing more in the investigator-sponsored trials. And collaborations with academia and the physicians to really understand some of the questions that they and the patients might have in terms of the current therapies that are out there.
Talking about patients, what kind of impact can patient groups have that goes beyond just plain old advocacy?
And it's an interesting question, Shanna, because to me, that's the fourth influencer. Is I think the impact that patient advocacy group is having is going well beyond just advocating for patients. And I think that still is the foundation of what they do. Yet what we've seen is greater examples of patient groups now becoming funders in certain areas where patients can't get access to therapy. They will end up paying for some of the therapies on behalf of the patients. We've also seen examples where patient advocacy groups are now becoming funders of clinical trials and small biotechs, all in the goal of being able to bring new therapies for high unmet need diseases. Great examples would include when you look at Sarepta right now with its Duchenne's muscular dystrophy therapy. A vast majority of the trials were being funded by the patient advocacy groups. Vertex was funded in the cystic fibrosis area, was in a strong partnership with the Cystic Fibrosis Society. So there's great examples of where the advocacy groups are now playing a bigger role in terms of helping startups get funding, also starting to put more influence and information in terms of what those clinical trials will be. There was a study done recently where they looked at osteoarthritis. And when they looked at the trials that were going on, roughly 80% of the trials were on drug evaluation. But when they asked patients what they were interested in seeing in the research, only 9% said they really wanted to see the drug evaluations. What they were looking more interested in is the post-analysis and looking at outcomes. What were the outcomes of these therapies? Because the outcomes then obviously be able to drive continued access. So the patient groups are now becoming more involved in what the clinical trial designs are as well, so that it best suits their needs and the needs of them being able to get access in the market.
It's interesting in terms of patient groups. My sister has a stepson who has a rare disease, and they thought at first he was one of maybe 2 or 3 people in the world who had this particular disease. But through social media, she's actually been able to put some stories out on the newspaper. They've gone on social media, and other parents from all over the globe have started to connect with her. And now they found 10 families who have a child who has this exact same disease, and the doctors have asked for my sister to essentially bring this group of people together for the future in being able to create a study. So it's interesting when you combine digital media, patient groups. Patients are getting I think a way larger voice on what the future will look like than they had even 5 years ago.
Oh, Shanna, I completely agree, especially when you look at the orphan drug rare disease area as well. The power of these advocacy groups is becoming stronger and stronger. And it's not just, again, on advocating to make sure that there's access. As I said, they are now playing a strong role in partnership with biotech companies and with academia and with politicians to be able to ensure there's the access, but also to make sure that there's the right funding for research. In fact, there's been also some examples where you get some biotech companies partner with patient advocacy groups to identify what the right price should be. So the role is going well beyond just, again, the advocating for the patient on that behalf. Their advocacy is now starting to extend into a variety of different areas. And social media, it's become a catalyst for being able to make this a more richer understanding. And in fact, even from a commercial person like myself, I think the great opportunity as well is for us to be able to now get real-time information on attitudes and beliefs of basically how people are feeling about their diseases, how they're feeling about therapies, and what their hopes and attitudes are around the future when they are diagnosed with these diseases, where companies would spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on market research. You can go through a click of the web and find all kinds of information on how patients are feeling about their diseases and their therapies. It's incredible to do. We started a while back when I was working at Biogen. We would start off a lot of our meetings with looking at actually videos of patients to remind ourselves on basically who we serve. But secondly, also understanding what their attitudes and beliefs are to make sure that we were still aligned with working to help improve their outcomes.
It's inspiring, really, how you can get so in touch with the patient that you serve, and ultimately the goal of the pharmaceutical industry, besides profitability, but really making a difference in people's lives and health.
Agreed. I think one part that, not so much an influencer, but I think something as an industry we need to start getting our heads around even more is, with the dawn of social media, the influence patients have is, as patients in the industry get closer and closer together, how do we still operate in a way so that obviously we are still ensuring that there isn't an influence in terms of therapy use, etc., when we're working with these patients. And I think that's an area that's probably going to keep a lot of lawyers employed for a long time.
If we were to sum all of this up, Paul, there's no doubt that the go-to-market model is changing. And I think really you could say it comes down to the power and quality of the partnerships that biotech and pharmaceutical companies are creating. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think if you were to sum up, based on the four influencers, what the industry needs to do better, and I think it's better at developing those partnerships, really catalyzing that power that a partnership has, and looking at addressing the needs of a broader network. Long of the day, basically going, I have a therapy, to go talk to a physician, to go educate them on its value. I think now we have to look at multiple channels, multiple customers, multiple influencers. And what that's also doing is, now when we're looking at who we bring into some of the companies, is now looking at more of the athlete mentality. Where before highly specialized people in an industry, I think now it's more of the analogy of being an inch deep and a mile wide, is being able to understand and having a broader knowledge of the market around us. So that power of partnership extends beyond just calling on a physician and considering that to be a partnership. A partnership is now getting deeper into research, it's getting deeper into clinical preparation, it's getting deeper into how we go to market and how we create value for the variety of customers that are out there.
That's fantastic. So just to summarize for our listeners, these four influencers, we have digital media, the reimbursement model, an expanded focus on local outcomes, and impact of patient groups beyond advocacy. Paul, it's really been a pleasure to have you here today on the Pharma and Biotech Thought Leadership Podcast. Thank you so much for bringing your thought leadership today.
Thank you again, Shanna, as well. I really enjoyed the talk, and it was great to be able to catch up.
You've been listening to the Pharma and Biotech Thought Leadership Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Shanna Landolt. It's been wonderful to be with you today. Tune in every week as I interview top thought leaders from the pharma and biotech industry.